I hooked up with my stepbrother and now he's blackmailing me. What should I do? Disclaimers on my Storytime on Instagram. Yes, I admit it. I'm an absolutely vile human being for hooking up with my stepbrother. Okay, but he's really, really hot. We're both 18, but this all went down when we were 17. A little backstory. My parents got divorced 5 years ago, and this affected me severely. I was so angry at them for separating us. I began to have a lot of anxiety about it. My dad was the one to move out of the house, so my mom and I tried to make the best of it. Not 2 months after their divorce was finalized, my mom met another guy, and he was the perfect man. He was really good looking and the CEO of a huge company. My mom's 45 and he's actually 10 years older than her. Being the angry teen that I was, I didn't want to accept it. She invited him over so that we could meet, but I was pretty much an asshole the entire time. To be honest, after the dinner, I actually ended up liking him. He was really funny, he made my mom laugh, and he understood my humor. All of this, of course, made my mom really happy. A few days later, this man calls me and tells me that he wants to propose to my mom. So he essentially wanted to get my permission first. So I said yes. That's when he moved in with his son. Part 2 is up. I hooked up with my stepbrother and now he's blackmailing me. That's when my mom's new fiance and his son were moving into our house. I decided that I would try to make the best of it. I was always so angry that I just needed to give myself a break. And the first time that I met him was when he moved in. As soon as he came in through the door, I was literally speechless. He was so hot. Like the best looking guy that I had ever seen in my life. I'm sorry you guys, I have hiccups right now. And we couldn't stop looking at each other. We all sat down to have lunch, and he and I just stared at each other the entire time. That's when my stepdad told us that after the wedding, we were all moving to a new house. Like I said, he has a lot of money, and I was actually really excited about this. A new house meant a new start. But guess what? My stepbrother started coming to the same school that I did. So we would basically go to school together every single day. That's when we both found out that we had so much in common. While we drove to school, he would always turn to look at me, and I would ask what's up, and he would say nothing. But one night he came into my room and he kissed me. Part 3 is up. So there I am making out with my stepbrother in my own bed. Mind you, I was asleep when he came in. As soon as I realized he was kissing me, I got out of bed. That's when he told me that he knew that we were both attracted to each other and that we should just do it. I stayed quiet and I didn't know how to respond. I felt super shy and embarrassed. Then he grabbed me and kissed me again. I told him to leave my room and he did. But after that, the sexual tension was real. I always caught him staring at me. Even at school, he would stare at me. And he would go out of his way to bump into me. One day we were driving home and he pulls over on a deserted road. He started kissing me and I couldn't resist. We ended up making out in his car for like an hour. After that, he told me that he wanted me to be his girlfriend, but in secret, and that he didn't want our parents to find out. But I said no because it's wrong. We live in the same house and our parents are married to each other. Of course, he got angry. Now he just grabs me and kisses me whenever he wants. And he says that I am his girlfriend even if I don't want to. And he told me that if I don't accept, he'll tell his dad about us. I really like him, but I think it's wrong. What should I do? I hid under my boyfriend's bed for 2 days and tried to poison him. Disclaimer is not my story time, it's sending me on Instagram. My boyfriend and I have been dating for 3 months. And when we started dating, I got really jealous. He was my first boyfriend and I just didn't know how to control my feelings. You can say I'm pretty toxic. Part of the reason why I'm so insecure is because my boyfriend is probably one of the most popular guys in school. He's a basketball player and he's about to be drafted. So all the girls are constantly trying to hook up with him. And this drives me insane. Whenever we go out, girls are falling over trying to get to him. A few weeks ago, I heard a rumor that my boyfriend had hooked up with a girl. When I asked him about it, he got really defensive. He got so angry he punched a hole in my wall. And well, this made me start thinking, maybe he was cheating on me. So I basically started stalking him. And that's what I've been doing for the past 2 weeks. I'm even skipping class just to go wherever he's going. That's when I decided that I would hide in his room. I even put on a diaper. Part 2 is up. I put on the diaper so that I could hide under my boyfriend's bed without having to get out. Disclaimer is not my story time, I was sending me on Instagram. I even took soft food with me so that he wouldn't hear me chewing. I knew he wouldn't be home, so I snuck into his dorm room. That's when I checked his entire room. I went through all of his clothes, even went through all of his dirty laundry just to smell them and make sure he didn't have anything in his pockets. Searched in between the mattresses and I found nothing. At this point, I was just looking for a sign of him having hooked up with somebody. I knew he was going to be coming home soon, so I snuck under the bed. It was pretty hidden underneath there because it's a huge bed. He came in by himself and started changing and went to take a shower. But he took his phone with him into the bathroom, so I didn't have a chance to check it. By the way, he thought that I had gone home to my parents' house, so he wasn't going to be hanging out with me at all. As he was getting ready, he put on cologne, and that's when I knew he was going to go look for another girl. A few hours later, he comes back and I'm still underneath the bed. And guess what? He's with a girl. The same girl I heard the rumor about. They come in there laughing and I can tell that they're clearly drunk. This girl goes to the bathroom and changes into lingerie. And then they started making out on the bed while I'm hiding underneath it. Part 3 is up. My boyfriend is making out with this girl on his bed. I'm hiding underneath it. Suddenly, she starts talking about how she's so happy they're finally a couple. How she's so happy he got away from me since I was such a crazy ex. Clearly, my boyfriend had been poisoning me against her. That's when I realized I really couldn't blame the girl. My boyfriend had clearly told her that he had broken up with me and that now he was with her. My plan was to initially get out of the bed and surprise them, but instead, I decided to wait. I managed to set up my phone while they were doing it on the bed, and I recorded recorded the entire thing. After they finally finish, she leaves. Boyfriend goes to take a shower and I finally come out underneath the bed. And I sit on his bed. And the look on this man's face when he comes out of the bathroom, priceless. But the best part is that I was filming the entire thing. At this point, I was still wearing the diapers because I had been under his bed for 2 days. I'm obviously looking rough. Then I tell him that I've been under his bed for the entire 2 days. He started calling me crazy and he tried to kick me out. Then I told him that he needs to break up with the girl and come back with me. If he didn't, I would send the video around to the entire school, including his coach, who is the girl's dad. I got him pretty good. So now he's still my boyfriend, although it's forced, to get back at him somehow. I'll keep you guys updated. Bye. My husband got my best friend pregnant and now is forcing me to raise the child. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. About a year ago, I started getting suspicious that my husband was having an affair. So naturally, I started investigating. I went through his phone when he was asleep, but I didn't find anything. That's when I realized that I needed to start following him. And when I did is when I found out who he was cheating on me with. Turns out it was my best friend. My best friend had just gotten a divorce with her husband at the time. And she told me that she was trying to have fun with as many men as she possibly could. I just never thought it would occur to her to sleep with my husband. For a full week, I followed my husband and he would see my best friend every single day. Sometimes they would meet up at her house since her husband left her the house. Sometimes they would end up at cheap motels. Of course, I started taking pictures on my iPhone to keep track of everything in case I needed to get a divorce. Come to find out, she was pregnant with twins. Part 2 is my husband got my best friend pregnant and is now forcing me to raise the kids. Disclaimer, is not my story time. After realizing that my husband was cheating on me with my best friend, I confronted him and her together. Pretended I was having a little dinner party and I invited her over. Really did make a nice dinner though. They did not suspect a thing. Comes into the house and gives me a big hug. Right then and there, I hand her my phone so that she could see all of the pictures I took of her and my husband making out outside of motels. Then she looks at my husband and says, "What did you say?" What did you say? He didn't even bother to look me in the face. Handed me back my phone and simply left the house. Then I'm left alone with my husband. Start confronting him and then he tells me that he made a mistake and that he was just bored with our relationship and that he loved me. He manipulated me so much that night that I ended up forgiving him. He promised he would never see my best friend again. And guess what? My bestie kept looking for my husband. One night she came over and told me that she needed to see him. I did not let her into the house and she started yelling. That's when she finally says I'm pregnant with twins. Apparently she had been pregnant for 3 months and didn't tell anybody. And my husband was happy about it. That's when he asked me if I would be willing to raise the kids. Part 3 is up. My husband got my best friend pregnant and is now forcing me to raise the kids. Disclaimer, is not my story time. After she told us that she was 3 months pregnant, my husband was so happy. He told her that he would take care of everything and not to worry about the medical bills. As soon as my best friend left our house, my husband turns to me and says, "You and I are gonna raise those kids without her." That's when I said he was crazy. I was not about to raise the kid that he had with my best friend. That's when he said that if I didn't, he would divorce me and marry my best friend. But I do have to say, I am still madly in love with my husband. We've only been together for 3 years. He was my dream man when we got married and he still kind of is my dream man even though he did cheat on me with my best friend. When he threatened me with that, I said okay. The next 6 months, my best friend moved into our house while she was pregnant. My husband and I served her hand and foot. And in some weird way, my best friend and I became best friends again, even though she was having my husband's babies. Also turns out that she was having twins. During the pregnancy, my husband told her that she could stay to live with us and we could all raise the kids together. To be honest, I didn't mind the idea. But my husband's real plan was to try to get rid of her, so that we could move away and she wouldn't be able to find us. But my best friend was looking forward to having her babies. Once she gave birth, my husband decided to bring her back to our house with the babies. Exactly a week later, he kicked her out of our house. And he offered her $50,000 to give the babies to us. And she agreed. So now I'm stuck raising the twins by myself. My husband is always away for work. My best friend never even comes around to look at her kids. My husband told me that he doesn't think we should have our own kids. He also promised he wouldn't cheat again, but I don't know what to believe. What should I do? Story time about how I hooked up with a police officer who arrested me and now I think he's stalking me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. I'm just a little bit of a party girl. I'm always getting myself into trouble and somehow I've never gotten arrested until last week. My friends and I constantly go out and get super drunk. Fortunately, when I get drunk, I tend to get a little bit aggressive. So if you're like me, do not drink. My friend group consists of 5 girls including me. 3 of them are super chill and funny when they get drunk. The other 2 turn into raging bitches when we get drunk. So half of the group is always trying to fight somebody and the other half is trying to calm the situation. So I'm the one that's always trying to start a fight. All of this went down last week. My friends and I are all standing at the bar and this one girl behind me starts pushing her way through. She is literally pushing me and my 2 other friends out of the way. Of course, I instantly flew into a rage because I'm already drunk. Without saying anything, I push the girl and she falls on her ass. Her friends come at me, start punching me and pulling my hair. So I started kicking them with my boots. Before I knew it, it was a huge fight between 5 people. Long story short, the police comes and they try to arrest us. Well, the cop that arrested me was really hot. So I flirted with him the whole time. Part 2 is up. Story time about how I hooked up with a police officer who arrested me and now he's stalking me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. That's when the super hot officer starts arresting me. So I decided to start flirting with him. I mean, why not? He put me in his police car and he started driving me to the station. On the way, I started asking him if he was single. And he actually flirted back. We actually had a pretty good conversation even though I was drunk. Spent 4 hours in the police station and they ended up calling my brother to get me out. Guess what I did? I told my brother to leave me at the police station because I was going to try to hook up with the police officer. My brother got so mad at me. He called me stupid and he left. That's when I went back into the police station and I started flirting with the police officer again. At this point, it was 5 in the morning and I was really hungry. So I asked him to take me out to breakfast and he did. We went to a cute diner. It was like a freaking movie. And then afterwards, we hooked up in his car. He did everything you could possibly imagine in his car. Here's the thing. My plan was to never see this man again. He took me home and he asked me for my number. I politely declined. Later that day, I go to class because, by the way, I'm in college. I actually saw this man driving by. So I wasn't sure, but then I realized it was him. Later on that night, I'm home and I'm about to take a shower. There's a knock on my door and I go open it. Guess who it is? Part 3 is story time about how I hooked up with the police officer who arrested me and now he's stalking me. Claim it's not my story time. I sent me on Instagram. Hear the knock on the door and I go to open it. And it's the police officer. Mind you, I'm in a towel about to take a shower. When I opened the door, I didn't say anything. Just staring at him like, what do you want? And he said, can I come in? And I said no. He came in anyway. He sat down on the couch and just stared at me. Then he asked me why I hooked up with him if my intention was not to ever see him again. I told him that I was simply just trying to have fun with him and that was it. Then he talked for 10 minutes about how he and I would make a great couple and how much in common we have. That alone was a huge red flag. He met me when I was drunk fighting with people at a bar. I mean, how could he want a relationship with me? And he said something that sent chills down my spine. He said, you look great in baby blue. I instantly realized that I was wearing baby blue underwear. He was watching me minutes before while I was getting undressed to take a shower. Tried to kiss me, but I pulled away. I told him that if he followed me again, I would report him. He laughed and said, you think that's gonna work? And he begged to take me out on a date. I said yes to going on a date because I feared that he was gonna try to R-word me. I'm going on a date with him in a few days. What should I do? How do I prepare for this? I need to somehow make him hate me. What should I do? I caught my boyfriend sending his nudes to his 12-year-old cousin. What should I do? Disclaimer is not my story time. Was sent me on Instagram. My boyfriend has always seemed like such a good guy. Out of all of his friends, he's the most considerate and loving person I've ever met. He's also such a gentleman. He always watches out for the girls in our friend group. He always goes out of his way to take me home so that I get home safely. He's the type of guy that will take his jacket off for anybody who's cold. No matter how cold he is, he will do that for other people. We've been in a serious relationship now for 6 months. Before that, we had dated on and off for 2 years. The only reason we broke up was because we lived in different countries. The distance was really hard to deal with. Finally moved back to my city for work and we've been inseparable since then. Since he moved back, we've been going to all of his family events. For his uncle's birthday, he told me that he couldn't take me because there wasn't enough space. I obviously thought this was really strange, but I said it's fine. Went to his uncle's party and stayed there until 4 in the morning. When I heard him come back home, I got up and went to the bathroom, only to find that he had locked himself in the bathroom. I knocked on the door and he got mad at me. Part 2 is up. Caught my boyfriend sending nudes to his 12-year-old cousin. What should I do? Disclaimer is not my story time. It was sent me on Instagram. I asked him why he locked himself in the bathroom and he wouldn't answer. Finally swung the door open and told me that I needed to mind my own business. This was the first time my boyfriend had ever been rude to me. For the next few days, I gave him the cold shoulder until he apologized. He made an excuse about having gotten into a fight with his uncle at his birthday party. A few weeks later, he invites me to another family event. This time, it's at the same uncle's house. I asked him if he really wanted to go considering they had gotten into a fight. That's when he said, what are you talking about? We never got into a fight. That's when I knew I had caught him in a lie. He swore up and down that he had never said that to me and that I was just making it up. Finally show up to his uncle's house and his cousin comes running to kiss him and hug him. At this point, I thought nothing of it. She's a 12-year-old girl who hasn't even gone through puberty yet. I actually thought it was really cute that he was paying so much attention to his cousin. The entire night, he played video games with her in a room, basically ignored me the entire time. I spent most of my night with his mom. I finally go to the room to look for him. He had his hand on her upper thigh. As soon as he sees me, he takes his hand away and looks at me. Part 3 is up. Caught my boyfriend sending nudes to his 12-year-old cousin. What should I do? Disclaimer is not my story time. It was sent me on Instagram. I walked in and he had his hand on her upper thigh. As soon as he saw me, he pulled it away. He saw that I saw and he freaked out. He got up and told me that we were going home. When we finally got home, I asked him what he was doing with his cousin all day. He said that we were just playing video games. Then he says, please don't make this weird. And I said, what do you mean weird? And he said, I'm just very affectionate with her. Don't twist it. Ew. Seriously, ew. Couldn't stop thinking about how he was touching his cousin. Finally went to bed and I got on his phone. That's when I saw the hidden album in his camera roll. When I opened it was all pee-pee pictures. And I realized those pictures were taken the same night that he had locked himself in the bathroom. He immediately got sick. This was sickening to me. I confronted him and he started apologizing right away. He got angry and grabbed his phone and smashed it. I told him that those pictures are still out there. And he told me that he had just made a bad decision and that his cousin asked him for it because she wants to know what pee-pees look like. He's asking me not to tell anyone. What should I do? Story time about how I crashed my ex's wedding and managed to break them up a month later. I'm definitely toxic and vindictive. So when my boyfriend broke up with me, I knew what I had to do. He and I dated for 9 months. And you could say that I was a little overbearing. If you guys saw what this man looked like, maybe you'd understand. He's the type of guy that all the girls want to get with. Not only is he super handsome, but he's also very successful. And he's a great guy. Comes from a great family and he's really close to them. I, on the other hand, grew up in the foster system, so having a family was always my biggest dream. And when I met his family, they took me in right away. His mom and I essentially became best friends. His dad would take me out to dinners and lunch, and they basically adopted me as their daughter. Here's when things started going wrong. I was extremely jealous and I basically didn't let him do anything. Every time he wanted to go out with his friends, I would start a fight. Anytime he would bring up a female friend from the past, I would simply threaten to break up with him. Trust me, I recognized that what I was doing was wrong, but part of me just couldn't control myself. I was willing to do anything to make him stay with me. Eventually, he got really sick of me, started mentioning that he wanted to take a break. So that's when I told him that I was pregnant. Was I pregnant? Absolutely not. Part 2 is up. Story time about how I crashed my ex's wedding and managed to break them up a month later. First time he threatened to break up with me, I told him that I was pregnant. It was obviously a lie and he knew it, so he basically still walked out on me. So in order to get his attention again, I decided to go to his family and tell them that I was pregnant. And they all believed me. His mom and dad even invited me to go live with them during the pregnancy. At first I said yes, but then I was like, hold on a second. How am I gonna fake a pregnancy? So to get myself out of that, I told him that I thought I was pregnant, but I actually wasn't. Yep, I'm starting my makeup all over again at this point. I had way too many layers on. During the time we were on a break, I basically followed him around everywhere just to make sure that he wasn't hooking up with any girls. Finally, 2 weeks later, he called me and told me that he missed me. We got back together, but the same thing happened. I was still jealous and controlling, but this time he was becoming more and more jealous. So much so that he started trying to control the way that I was dressing. Around this time, we started having huge fights. He would punch the wall right by my head. I would throw things at him, even threw a knife at him once. But part of me liked that he was so jealous and toxic. He was obsessed with me. And he broke up with me again, and 2 months later, he was engaged. And guess what? His family invited me to their engagement party. Part 3 is up. Story time about how I crashed my ex's wedding and managed to break them up a month later. That's when I get the invitation for his engagement party. At this point, it seems that my ex's parents thought we separated on good terms. So of course, I showed up to that engagement party. As soon as my ex saw me, he came straight to me and told me to leave. And I told him that I was welcome because his parents had invited me. He gave me a whole speech about how we were over and I needed to accept it. But of course, not one single part of me was willing to accept that. Then he called me an Uber, so I actually did end up leaving. When the wedding comes around, I was the first guest to show up. As soon as his parents saw me, they welcomed me. So I went and sat down at the parents' table. When my ex came out, he nearly fell over. Mind you, this is the first time I'm meeting his wife. I went up to her and told her that I was an ex of his. That's when she looked at me and said, when did you guys date? I said we dated for 9 months. And then she says that they had been dating at the same time. So then a whole bunch of drama goes down. She goes to him and starts slapping him. He starts to cry. And then his parents asked me to leave. So I did. The next month, I followed her everywhere. Finally told me to leave her alone and that they had already gotten a divorce. So my plan worked. Now I'm trying to figure out how to get back with my ex. What should I do? My husband told me he wants a second wife. We are practicing Mormons and my husband believes that he deserves a second wife. When we first got engaged, I told him that the only way I would marry him was if he did not take on more wives. We've been married now for 6 months and he's already begging me to get a second wife. Part of me understands why he wants it, but the other part of me thinks it's just gratuitous. No man needs more than one wife. I met a few single women at church and he's been flirting with them non-stop. One of them in particular has been flirting back. Everyone in our church knows that my husband is not allowed to have another wife. This one girl keeps trying to get into our lives. She basically shows up everywhere we do, and she's always trying to catch his eye when we're at church. I found out a dirty little secret about her. A few years ago, she used to be a stripper. I threatened her to stay away from my husband. If not, I would tell him that she was a stripper. She actually told me that my husband wouldn't believe me and that she was gonna marry him anyway. I caught them texting and she was telling him how lonely she is. I told my husband that she was a stripper and he said that he didn't care. That she needed saving? What the heck should I do now? I don't want a second wife. My husband told me he wants a second wife update. That's when my husband told me that he still wants to marry her and that the church could save her. Since the news of her being a stripper in the past didn't turn him off, I had to start digging some more. I went onto her Facebook and started looking back through all of her pictures. I also went on her friends and family's Facebooks too. On one of her friends' accounts, I found a post from 2012. They were partying it up in the Greek islands. As I looked closer into the picture, I saw there were 2 men with them. I started Googling the men's names and I found that they were both pimps. The more I searched, the more pictures I found of her with this one guy. And in some of the pictures, they were even making out. This is when it hit me. She was probably a pro. And this guy was pimping her out. My husband is so 2000s that he doesn't even have a computer. So I decided to go print out all of the evidence. I printed out all of the pictures of her and this guy, some of her family's pictures of her drinking and partying. I made my husband his favorite dinner and then I sat him down. I told him I would never accept a second wife, especially her. When I showed him all the pictures, he told me he felt sick. Apparently, she told him that she was a nun. Remember I said they had been texting? Well, they never stopped texting. Then he confessed that she even sent him a naked picture. Part 2 is My husband told me he wants a second wife update, and he finally accepted that this woman had been a pro in her past and a stripper. He said that he would stop speaking to her. Mind you, this all happened like 2 days ago. I asked my husband to show me his phone so that I could see the messages between them. He handed his phone over and started to cry. He said that she had lied to him and told him that she was a nun. Apparently, after she became a stripper, she decided to leave that life and become a nun. How stupid is my husband that he actually believed her? That's when I saw that she had sent him plenty of nudes. And I asked my husband, "You think that this woman is a nun?" And he said, "You're right, I should have known." We went to church and told on her. Now everyone in the church knows her truth. But things get worse. After she found out that we told on her, she came over to our house and started threatening us. Wouldn't let her in the house, but then she begged my husband to let her in. And he opened the damn door. That's when she begged my husband to take her on as a second wife, and that she would be the best wife and even better than I am. While I'm standing right there. Thankfully, my husband used his one brain cell and said no. That's when she grabbed my hair and started banging my head against the wall. Stupid husband stood there watching. I had to fight her off alone. That's when she looked at both of us and said that we would regret it, and she ran away. And my husband had another confession. They had hooked up once. Part 3 is up. My husband told me he wants a second wife update. That's when he confessed that they had hooked up once. That's when it all made sense to me. She was so upset because they had already hooked up. Then he told me that he had promised her a ring. At this point, my husband has cheated on me. I have grounds to divorce him. I was actually so upset I left the house. A few hours after his confession, he calls me and tells me to come right back home. And when I get home, all our clothes were ripped up. This crazy psycho girl came back to our house, took scissors, and started cutting up all our clothes. She even cut up my wedding dress. She flushed all my makeup down the toilet. She actually stole one of my husband's fire weapons. Now this is the thing that really scares us. We don't know what she's capable of. My husband is so stupid though that he doesn't want to report her to the police. He feels guilty for having taken advantage of her, which in all honesty he definitely did. He slept with her and promised her a ring, packed up what I had left of my clothes, and I left my husband. I'm meeting a lawyer tomorrow and I'm gonna ask him for a divorce. I just honestly can't believe how stupid he is. And now I'm scared for my life. Thankfully she doesn't know where my parents live. I'm also leaving the Mormon church, taking my parents on a vacation. F you, husband. After I blackmailed my boyfriend into staying with me, otherwise I would send his sex tape to his coach, everything went downhill. Remember, at this point I had been hiding under his bed for 2 days, and I was wearing a stinky diaper, like full of poo and pee. I went home and showered, and that's when he came over. Then he started tearing through my apartment trying to find the sex tape. I told him I had hid it somewhere safe, and I actually did. I opened up a safety deposit box at a bank, so there was no way he was gonna find it. Then he swore that he would stay with me in the relationship as long as I didn't send that tape. Remember, his coach is the dad of the girl that he had slept with, the one in the sex tape. For the next few days, he acted kind of normal. He was kind of angry, but he was still acting like my boyfriend. That's when I forced him to give me his computer and his phone. And I found out that he had been talking to 4 other girls. And he had been doing some nasty stuff on his laptop. This is what really opened up my eyes. At this point, I kind of started losing interest in him. I wasn't even attracted to him anymore. And I confronted him about the 4 girls. He told me that they were just having fun and that I shouldn't flip out over that. After the week, I went to the safety deposit box and got the tape. And guess what? I sent it to his coach. You see, not only was my boyfriend breaking my heart, but he was also doing it to the 4 other girls. He made up so many lies about me. Of course, I sent in the video anonymously. 2 days later, he was kicked off the team. The school only expelled him for 3 days though, so he's still in school. And apparently his coach is willing to let him back on the team as long as he apologizes to his daughter. I feel like I need to do something worse to him. Can you guys give me any ideas? Bye. Story time about how I cheated on my husband, lied about getting pregnant, and left with all his money. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. Oh, this is gonna be a good one, you guys. A little background, my husband and I met 2 years ago. And lucky for me, he's a wealthy plastic surgeon. So a little backstory. I actually met him because I wanted to get a nose job. I made an appointment in his office and I went. We actually hit it off right away, even though he's older than me and, you know, wasn't the best looking. After the appointment, I decided I would get the nose job. A few days later, I get a phone call. Guess who it is? It's the wealthy plastic surgeon who I just saw. He asked me out on a date and I said yes, of course. By the way, at the time I was a sugar baby, so I had a few sugar daddies. I figured he would just become another sugar daddy. He took me out to the best restaurant in town, and you better believe I ordered the most expensive thing on the menu. After my surgery, he would bring me food and was just really nice. Then he asked me to be his girlfriend and I decided to give him a chance. I even broke up with 2 sugar daddies to make space for him. That's when I asked my boyfriend for an allowance. He said of course. There's so much more to the story. Part 2 is up. Part 2 about how I cheated on my husband, lied about being pregnant, oh yeah, and stole all of his money. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. This was sent to me on Instagram. So like I said in part 1, I had asked him for an allowance. Of course he said yes and offered me $3,000 a month. I accepted even though it was on the low end. By the way, I still had 1 sugar daddy at this time. Oh, and I forgot to mention, I was pretty obsessed with the Kardashians. My goal in life is to look like Kim K. So now that I had a plastic surgeon boyfriend, I decided to ask him what other surgeries he thinks I could do. I already had my nose job. Now I definitely wanted to do some other stuff on my body. But when I told him, he got really upset. He said I didn't need to change anything about me and that I needed to stop looking for attention from other men. That's when I told him that would be totally impossible and that I definitely was going to keep my other sugar daddy. He totally flips out because he didn't know I had a sugar daddy. Then he asked me if I was actually in love with him. I told him that love would grow eventually, but that I really did like him. Then he started playing hard to get, like he wanted me to apologize and beg him, but I was not the type. So we ended up not speaking for a few weeks. Eventually he comes over to my apartment and asks me what surgeries I want to get done. And back to the surgery table I went. Part 3 is up. 3 about how I cheated on my husband, lied about being pregnant, oh yeah, and stole all of his money. Well, almost all of it. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it was sent to me on Instagram. So my plastic surgeon boyfriend decides to do more plastic surgery on me. But this time, it was free. We decided to get my bum done. Again, during the healing process, he was a total angel and brought me food and took care of me. Yeah, he was also paying for all of my bills and my rent this time, even though I still had a sugar daddy. And he knew it. A few months passed and he asked me to go to Italy with him. Of course I said yes. We stayed at a beautiful place in Tuscany and then he asked me to marry him. He had planned out this whole romantic dinner and of course I had to say yes. But on one condition, that I let go of my last sugar daddy. So I told him I would, although I actually did not. So we started planning my dream wedding. We finally got married and I moved into his mansion. Then he told me that I had to get pregnant right away. His excuse is that he's in his 50s and he really wants to have kids. I said I wanted to have a baby too, but I kept taking the pill. I mean, I am just not ready to have kids or to ruin my beautiful body. This is when my other sugar daddy started getting really annoyed because I never spent time with him. It was really hard being torn between two men. Part 4 is up. Part 4 about how I cheated on my husband, lied about being pregnant, and stole all of his money. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it was sent to me on Instagram. So like I said, my sugar daddy was starting to get really annoyed at me because I never spent enough time with him. That's when I broke it to him that I was actually married. He totally flipped out, called me a user, cut me off, and blocked me from everything. So that meant I was not getting money from this sugar daddy at all. It meant I was totally dependent on my husband. Remember I said my husband wanted me to get pregnant? Well, I kept taking the pill because I didn't want to get pregnant. But my husband would ask me every single day how that was going. And I was like, it's going. I even started lying, saying that I was going to go to the baby doctor just to get myself checked, and I really wouldn't. Instead, I would go have lunch and shop. Around this time, an old sugar daddy of mine contacted me, who I still had a crush on. He was like super good looking. He offered me some money and asked me if I wanted to go on a few dates, so of course I said yes. I accepted because I really wanted to just separate myself financially from my husband. I didn't want to be dependent on him all the time. So when my husband was at work, I would go out on dates with this new sugar daddy. The sugar daddy wanted me to go on a trip with him, and I had to say no. He got really upset and started asking questions. Of course, I didn't tell him that I was married, but he started getting really suspicious. He also started to catch feelings really quick. Like he always wanted to be with me, he would text me all the time. And that's when my husband finds a text message from the sugar daddy. I basically denied everything and I told him that I no longer had any sugar daddies, but my husband did not believe me. That's when he calls my sugar daddy from my phone and tells him to leave me alone. And the sugar daddy told him that only I could make that decision. So I basically had to cut off the sugar daddy right in front of my husband. My husband was like really angry at this time, so I was on my best behavior for the next few weeks. But after a few weeks, he was still really angry, so I realized I needed to start taking money out of the account that he gave me. So I started transferring money from his account to my account. And then from my account to another account at a different bank. And guess what? My husband did not notice one bit. He had several other accounts and investments and all this other stuff, so he never really noticed if anything went missing from that one account. After a few months, I had $50,000 in that bank account. I knew it wasn't enough, so I had to start taking more money out. And then a few months after that, I was at $120,000. I knew this was enough to get me a little house somewhere and just like basically live by myself. That's when I devised a whole plan. I would leave the country and buy myself a house. Even started looking for a real estate agent in other countries. But then the poo hit the fan. My husband found my pills and asked me if I was actually trying to get pregnant or not. Once again, I started lying and I told him that of course I wanted to have a baby with him. Then he insisted we go to the doctor together. That's when he found out that I had not gone to the doctor once. He told me that if I didn't want kids, we would have to get a divorce, so I told him that I didn't want kids. That's when I told him I wanted a divorce and that I only wanted half of his stuff. He started laughing in my face and left. I knew I had to act quick because it was a matter of time before he found out I stole all that money. The very next day, I booked a flight and left. He started blowing up my phone, asking me where I was, calling me. Then he started threatening me for taking all the money in the bank account and that he hired private investigators to find me. Now I'm considering going back to him, but I honestly don't know what to do. I got myself a cute little house and even found a new sugar daddy. But I know he's still looking for me. What should I do, you guys? I think I really messed up, you guys. Story time about how I caught my husband cheating on me with our very young nanny. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I was sending me on Instagram. I'm 45 years old and my husband is 10 years younger than me. When we first got married, my friends kept telling me not to marry someone so much younger. They told me that he would eventually cheat and leave me for someone younger. I refused to believe this though because my husband and I really loved each other. Or at least I thought. We met at a party a few years ago and he made the first move right away. He asked me out on a date and a few weeks later we became boyfriend and girlfriend. A few years after that we got married and after years of trying we finally got pregnant and had twins. They are both 2 years old now. My husband's job requires him to travel a lot. I own a really big salon and business is good. So we have a pretty good life and are able to afford a lot of things for our kids. Since my husband travels, my schedule has to be really flexible. I take care of the kids in the morning and then I go off to work, leaving them with the nanny. Our first nanny was a lot older and she had lots of experience. But she unexpectedly quit on us, so we had to find another one. We decided to look for one of those nanny agencies. We ended up interviewing about 5 nannies, but my husband was set on one of them, and she was the youngest out of all of them, 18. Oh yeah, and the most attractive too. My husband told me that maybe we should try someone younger so that the kids can have fun, and I said yes. The nanny would cover for me for about 4 hours a day when I was at work. Her and I started to get along really well. She would tell me about her boy troubles and I would give her advice. Part 2 is up. Part 2 of how I caught my husband cheating on me with our very young nanny. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I sent me on Instagram. The nanny and I started to become really good friends. I even started telling her about the problems I was having with my husband. Little did I know that she was the problem. Like I said in part 1, my husband travels a lot. This is what we would usually fight about. You see, it was actually really easy for him to travel less. All he had to do was pick a different region for his job. Instead of a 6-hour flight, it could have been a 2-hour trip. His excuse was that he would get paid less. When I was telling the nanny about our issues, she told me that I should just let it go and let my husband have his freedom. But the way she said it really bothered me. I ended the conversation and told her that she could go home. When my husband came home, I mentioned to him what the nanny said. I told him that I didn't like the way she told me that I needed to give him his freedom. He started to laugh and said, "She's just a young girl. She's probably just saying what she thinks you need to hear." I decided to listen to my husband and I let it go. A week later, the nanny comes over to take care of the kids. By the way, as soon as she would come to my house, I would serve her a plate of food or make her anything she wanted before I left to work. She sat down to eat. I could see her messages on her phone, and the name on the messages was the same as my husband's. I asked her why she was messaging my husband and she quickly put her phone in her purse. She didn't even know what to say. Part 3 is up. Part 3 of how I caught my husband cheating on me with our very young nanny. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I sent me on Instagram. When I asked her why she was messaging my husband on her phone, she did not know what to say. I asked her if she was okay. Then she replies with, "I just needed some advice for my car." She was so nervous. I asked her to pull out her phone and give it to me. That's when she said no and started putting up a fight. She told me I had no right to check her phone, but I didn't believe her. I ripped her purse from her hands and grabbed the phone. Before I even have a chance to look at the messages, she starts calling me fat and old, and that my husband is planning to leave me for her. Honestly, what she was saying didn't faze me because my goal was to look at the messages. And she was pretty much right. In the messages, my husband promised her to leave me for her, and that he was sick of me and the kids. I begin to scroll up and see all of the pictures that they send each other. You can imagine what they were. By the way, the nanny was only a day from turning 18. Yep. Out of nowhere, she starts breaking plates and glasses and verbally abusing me. She even said that if I didn't leave him alone, that something bad would happen to me. I grabbed her by the arm and threw her out of the house. But I kept her phone, so I called my husband from the phone. When he hears my voice, he hangs up the phone. When he finally got home, we got into a 6-hour fight. I made him leave the house, but apparently the nanny went crazy. She started stalking him and he had to get a restraining order against her. Serves him right. Her parents are threatening to press charges. I don't want my kids to grow up without a father, but I don't want to get back with him. What should I do? 3 of how I caught my husband cheating on me with our very young nanny. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I sent me on Instagram. When I asked her why she was messaging my husband on her phone, she did not know what to say. I asked her if she was okay. Then she replies with, "I just needed some advice for my car." She was so nervous. I asked her to pull out her phone and give it to me. That's when she said no and started putting up a fight. She told me I had no right to check her phone, but I didn't believe her. I ripped her purse from her hands and grabbed the phone. Before I even have a chance to look at the messages, she starts calling me fat and old, and that my husband is planning to leave me for her. Honestly, what she was saying didn't faze me because my goal was to look at the messages. And she was pretty much right. In the messages, my husband promised her to leave me for her, and that he was sick of me and the kids. I begin to scroll up and see all of the pictures that they send each other. You can imagine what they were. By the way, the nanny was only a day from turning 18. Yep. Out of nowhere, she starts breaking plates and glasses and verbally abusing me. She even said that if I didn't leave him alone, that something bad would happen to me. I grabbed her by the arm and threw her out of the house. But I kept her phone, so I called my husband from the phone. When he hears my voice, he hangs up the phone. When he finally got home, we got into a 6-hour fight. I made him leave the house, but apparently the nanny went crazy. She started stalking him and he had to get a restraining order against her. Serves him right. Her parents are threatening to press charges. I don't want my kids to grow up without a father, but I don't want to get back with him. What should I do?
My fiance doesn't know that my ex-boyfriend pays for all my bills and my student loans. Am I the asshole for not telling him? Although I do love my fiance, he really never offers to pay for things unless I ask him to. And not that I need him to pay, but it would be nice to know that he has my back for once. After a year of dating, we got engaged, and we've been engaged now for 2 months. I will say my fiance is definitely one of my best friends. I literally can tell this man anything and he never judges me. He's also my hype man, and he's also super funny and we laugh like all day long. So this is the part where I have to tell you about my ex. My ex and I were together for 4 years. He is a very, very successful man, very rich and very handsome. And the reason we broke up is because we would get into really bad fights. He was extremely jealous and so was I. The relationship was absolutely completely toxic. So it's not like I want to get back with him, but he was the kind of guy that paid for everything. Even if I had the money to pay for shit, he would always offer to pay for me. We were so attracted to each other, but we were crazy. When we broke up, my ex told me that he would always help me financially no matter what. He's obviously kept his promise to this day. Part 2 is up. My fiance does not know that my ex pays for my bills and my student loans. Am I the asshole for not telling him? After my crazy toxic relationship with my ex, he promised he would always help me financially. So in 2020 when I lost my job, I hit him up and he sent me money right away. He sent me $10,000 to start with. I paid bills and some of my student loans off, and 3 months later I asked him for another 10 grand. But he actually sent me 30 instead. This held me over for almost a full year. This was right around the time that I met my now fiance. When my fiance and I started dating, of course I was not going to tell him that my ex was paying for my stuff. He just assumed that I had money saved up. Luckily last year, I did get rehired at my old job, but with a pay cut. When my fiance and I moved in together, I asked him if he could pay most of the rent, and he said no. He said he was only able to pay for half of the rent, and he literally splits everything. This man even makes me split the cost of toilet paper. I get a Venmo request from him almost every single day every time he buys something. I'm trying not to let it bother me, but at the same time, is he gonna be able to support me when I'm pregnant? I asked him if he would be willing to help me financially. He said no. Part 3 is up. My fiance doesn't know that my ex is paying for my student loans and my bills. Am I the asshole for not telling him? That's when I asked my fiance if he could help me out financially. This man said no. I was actually shocked. I started to cry and I told him exactly what I thought. First off, he makes me split everything and never invites me out to dinner. Like, never offers to pay for anything. Even if I wanted like a cookie or something at Starbucks, he doesn't pay for that. I have offered to pay for things for him. Sometimes I'll buy dinner for us on the way home and I don't ask him to pay me. I was really close to confessing to him that my ex was paying for a lot of stuff for me. But that's when my fiance told me that he just thinks it's fair for me to pay for my own things. I asked him, what about when I'm pregnant? What if I can't work? He says that I can just pay for my stuff with my own savings. Then I asked him if he would be able to pay for all the kids' things. He said no, that I would have to pay for exactly half of the kids' things. And I know what you're thinking. The fact that we didn't have this conversation before we got engaged is crazy. Now I really want to tell him about my ex. And I'm even thinking about getting back with my crazy ex. My fiance is just so blah now to me. Like, I can't even look at him the same way anymore. I know I'm not being unreasonable. It's not like I'm asking him to pay for everything. What should I do? Here's a little story time of what my crazy celebrity ex-boyfriend would get mad at if I did or did not do. He would get mad if I would, for example, go to the DMV and put lip gloss on to take a picture. He said that I was trying to get attention from other guys, and the fact that he wasn't going with me proved that I was trying to get attention from other guys, therefore pickup guys at the DMV. He would also get mad if I showed him too much affection or if I tried to kiss him, because he said that that meant that I was a nymphomaniac and that the only conclusion he could come to was that I was cheating on him because I was a nymphomaniac. So eventually I stopped being affectionate altogether, and that made him think that I didn't want him because I was never affectionate. So I told him one day, well, if I am affectionate, it's bad, but if I'm not affectionate, it's bad. And he said, you're right, so you're stuck. He would also, for some reason, think that I was Lil Wayne's side chick, so anytime a Lil Wayne song came on, I had to. Part 2 of what my celebrity ex-boyfriend would get mad at if I did or didn't do. He would get mad if I answered the phone too quick because that meant that I was hiding something and I didn't want him to be suspicious, but it also made him mad if I didn't answer the phone quick enough because that meant that I was definitely doing something bad. He would also get mad if I offered to go over to his place instead of mine because that meant I was hiding guys in my apartment, in my bathroom and in my closet. So he would randomly show up to my apartment, check underneath my bed, my closets, and my bathrooms. And when he saw that there was no one there, he would storm out and say, I'm gonna catch you one day. He would also get upset if my manager or my agent called me telling me that I had an audition because it made him envious, although he would say that what they were trying to do was actually pimp me out. He would get so envious and jealous if I had booked a commercial, if I was working on set, or if I had anything going for me in my life other than him.
I just matched with my dead wife on Tinder. I had numbly swiped left so many times in a row I almost missed it. I wish I had. My wife Allison had been dead for 2 full years. Yet there she was, on Tinder, smiling at me, in a photo I had never seen, looking older than she did when she passed. All of the air went out of the room. I skimmed through the rest of her profile. There was no writing, but 3 other pictures of my dead wife I had never seen before, including one with the Statue of Liberty behind her, even though I knew she had never been to New York City. At least to my knowledge, the profile had the right name. The right after for if my wife had just kept living after July 2020 but her location was 9 miles away. I swiped right and breathed. I swiped right and breathed for the first time in nearly 2 minutes. I struggled to sleep for the next 48 hours. Never getting a match. Ready to message Tinder and tell them someone was impersonating my beloved dead wife on their app and doing some kind of magical Photoshop to put her in pictures that never existed. The match came at 3:33 a.m., lighting up my phone. I was already awake. The match came with a message. Just a simple hi. The absolute worst in any situation, let alone this one. I mashed the letters on my phone as hard and as fast as I could. Who is this? Why are you doing this? And where did you get these pictures of my wife? She died of cervical cancer 2 years ago, you monster. I had to wait for another 24 hours before I got an answer. It came in the middle of the, are you home? What? What the fuck? I got another answer before I could form my own. I'm outside. My blood ran cold. Something rattled in the darkness of my kitchen and I jumped up and readied myself in bed, then realized it was just ice dropping in the ice maker in the freezer. Another message. Holy shit. Let me in, please. Fuck. 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 What? Someone had to be fucking with me, but who would be this impossibly cruel and diabolical? There may have been a couple of people who didn't like me at work, but no one who would go anywhere near this far. Another message. Never mind. No more time for thought. Just reading. Never mind.
My husband just confessed to me that he settled for me. Disclaimer is not my story time, send me on Instagram. Ugh. My husband and I met when we were in college. My best friend at the time, let's call her Tori. Her and I lived together and were best friends. We did everything together. I mean, we were like sisters. Let's call my husband Jack. Jack came to school and he was a newbie. He had 0 friends, so Tori and I decided to take him in. So the 3 of us went on to become the 3 Musketeers. He would stay over our apartment so much that we actually just asked him to move in. We would cook for each other, help each other study. We would even do each other's laundry whenever somebody needed help. I'm telling you, we were all like a tight-knit family. But I have a confession. As soon as Jack moved in, I started falling in love with him. But at the time, I never had the balls to ever tell him. You see, Tori was considered the prettier of the 2 of us. And I never resented Tori for that, but people made it very clear that she was the prettier one. And she was always the one to get hit on, never me. But one night, we all got drunk and Jack ended up kissing me. He actually even tried to hook up with me, but I said no, part 2 is up. My husband confessed that he settled for me. Disclaimer, it's not my story time, I sent me on Instagram. That night he tried to hook up with me, but I said no. Following morning, he actually apologized. At the time, Tori had just started dating another guy. I mean, Tori had a new boyfriend every single week. At the time, I wished I could have 1 boyfriend. While she had 10, I had 0. This is when I started noticing that Jack was a little jealous of Tori's new relationship. Anytime her new boyfriend would come over, he would get in a really bad mood. I asked him if he was jealous and he said no. A few days later, we all got drunk again, and Jack kissed me again. Eventually, we ended up dating, and he asked me to be his girlfriend, and then we got married. And that all happened within a year. Tori at this time had already gotten married to the guy that she was dating. We actually both had our weddings around the same time. At the time, I felt so lucky that I was able to marry the man that I had fallen in love with in college. I was actually afraid that I would end up alone because I wasn't as pretty as Tori. Fast forward to a year after we all got married. We actually all ended up living in the same cities as well. Tori invited us over for dinner to see their new house. During the dinner, my husband decided to have a few too many drinks. And that's when he blurted out, "I actually liked Tori before I liked you. I only married you because Tori got engaged." They all laughed at this. They clearly thought it was a joke. I laughed it off too. Part 3 is up. My husband confessed to me that he settled for me. Disclaimers are not my story time, I sent me on Instagram. That's when he said in front of everyone that he only married me because he lost his chance with Tori. They all laughed. I mean, even Tori's husband found it funny. When we finally got in the car to head home, I asked him if he actually meant it. He looked at me and he said, "Yeah, I liked Tori before I liked you," and that the only reason he hooked up with me was because he was mad at Tori. I started to cry uncontrollably. This whole time I never thought he had a thing for Tori. He stops the car and he says, "But I love you," that he had no feelings for Tori anymore. I asked him why he would think that was okay to say out loud. He said he had probably had too many drinks. Yeah, it's the alcohol's fault for sure. When we got home, I asked him again if he really loved me. That's when he explained that the love he has for me is different than the love he had for Tori, and that he was actually infatuated with Tori. That our love was safe love. He said, "Just forget about what I said. It was just a joke. I just wanted to make everyone laugh." That's when I realized that he had made a joke at my cost. And it was all to make Tori laugh. I called Tori the next day and explained everything to her. That's when she confessed that her and Jack had been hooking up in college. That sometimes they would hook up when I was asleep on the couch, but they had even done it on top of the kitchen counter and in my bedroom. I told my husband, and that's when he said that I needed to let it go. That Tori was part of the past. He doesn't even touch me or kiss me. He's always angry and reproaching everything that I did. Thinking about leaving him. We don't have kids yet. What should I do? Is it weird that my boyfriend keeps asking for feet pictures dipped in peanut butter? My boyfriend and I have been together for 6 months, and within the 6 months, I realized he has a lot of weird fetishes. He's completely obsessed with my feet and always wants to touch them. He also loves it when I wear black stilettos, but lately he's become more demanding. We see each other on the weekends because we live about 2 hours from each other. This means he's always asking me for pictures. But now it's gotten to the point where he's asking me to send him pictures of me dipping my feet in different food. For example, chocolate sauce or peanut butter. And the worst one, mustard. I mean, I want to say yes to all of these things. And when I say no, he gets really angry. He threatens to break up with me and says that I'm not fulfilling his needs. He slept over at my place the other night and I found him looking at really weird stuff on the internet. Like a lot of weird feet stuff. I can't even describe it, it was so disturbing. But I do love him and I don't want him to leave me. Should I just give in and send him the feet pictures with the peanut butter? Or should I stay strong and say no? What should I do? Story time about how my father is obsessed with me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, I'm sending me on Instagram. And trigger warning, my mom and dad had me when they were very, very young. My mom was 14 years old when she got pregnant with me. From what my mom told me, my parents were pretty much together throughout the whole pregnancy. Even though they were both in high school, they wanted to move in together and try to raise me like a regular family. But my maternal grandmother had a very big issue with this. She wanted my mom to continue going to high school and possibly even give me up for adoption. But my mom was not having it, so she decided to move out with my dad. Once I was born, unfortunately, my parents just couldn't take care of me. My dad was too busy playing his football and trying to get a scholarship. And my mom just didn't really know how to take care of a child. I mean, she was a child herself. This is when my grandmother stepped in and decided to take me in, which I thank God for every single day of my life. My grandmother raised me as her own daughter, and she has been the most amazing woman in my entire life. My parents split up, and through most of my childhood, I lived with my mom and my grandmother. I didn't see my dad for about 10 years. By the time I saw him again, I was 15 years old. Part 2 is up. Story time about how my father is obsessed with me. Disclaimer is not my story time, it's that I mean on Instagram. And trigger warning. I finally saw my father again when I was 15 years old. From the moment he saw me, he wanted to hug me and kiss me all the time. At first, I thought it was normal because he's my father and he hadn't seen me in over 10 years. After a few weeks of him coming to visit me, I started feeling really strange. This was also around the time where I was getting noticed by boys in school. And you know that feeling you get when you know a guy likes you? Well, that's the feeling I started getting from my own father. Every time he touched me, it was like too touchy. And every kiss was just strange. One of the things that really started to bother me was that he liked going to the beach. And he wanted to make it a thing. He would always say, let's go to the beach on the weekend. But I didn't feel comfortable with him. First off, he never invited my mom to come or my grandma. So it was always just me and him. He even took me shopping for bikinis. And this is when my stomach dropped. At the bikini shop, he asked for small bikinis. Like the type that show a lot of skin. Told him I wasn't comfortable with that. I wanted a bathing suit. He said no and bought me a thong bikini. He stared at me all day at the beach. Part 3 is up. Storytime about how my father is obsessed with me, part 3. After he bought me the thong bikini and forced me to wear it at the beach, I noticed he was staring at me. I wrapped myself in a towel and told him I wanted to leave. After that, I told my mom and my grandma how I felt about my dad. They thought that I was exaggerating, but I knew that I wasn't. My mom asked him to never ever do anything like that again, and he said he wouldn't. After that, he would always do certain things, like stare at me too much, or always want to hug me and kiss me. And for my own comfort and safety, I put a lot of space between him and I. When I was 18, I finally got my first boyfriend. He became enraged when my mom told him. He told my mom that I was acting like a slut. That's when I cut him out completely from my life. A year later, I got on Instagram, and that's when he started following me there. He started leaving strange comments on all my pictures, and eventually he started offering me money to spend more time with him. I told him I wasn't comfortable with him. That's when he told me that all he wanted to do was watch me take a bath, and that he would pay me thousands if I let him. My grandmother and my mom have completely cut him out of our lives. On the day of my wedding, we hired security to keep him away. And of course, he managed to show up, but security kicked him out. I'm thinking I should get a restraining order. Luckily, my mental health hasn't suffered too much from this. He's obviously an unwell person, but I actually feel really bad for him. And I feel like getting a restraining order is just gonna make things worse. What the heck should I do? Bye. I cheated on my husband 14 times with his best friend and other guys, and now I don't know what to do about it. This story is wild, so hold on. My husband and I have been married for 2 years. We're best friends, so we've had a really good relationship. We got married after 6 months of meeting each other. During that whole time, I met a lot of his friends, including his best friend. But he told me he had another best friend who was going to be traveling for a full year. One day, my husband tells me that all his friends are getting together to greet their best friend, the one who had been traveling for a full year. We show up to the party, and it turns out that this best friend is a woman. Not just any woman, one that looks like she could model for Vogue. This woman was so good looking, I instantly got insecure. When her and my husband saw each other, they ran to each other's arms. Then I spent the entire night trying to be included in the conversation. Every time I would ask a question, she would answer it to my husband. She would never even look me in the face. Finally, I asked her if she had a problem, and she said, "No, I'm sorry. I'm just really excited to see my best friend." When we got in the car, I told my husband I didn't like her. Then he said that he knew exactly what I was going to say. And he also said not to worry because I would never have to hang out with her. And that he would hang out with her without me, just to save me the trouble. Part 2 is up. I cheated on my husband 14 times with his best friend and other guys, and now I don't know what to do. That's when he told me that he would hang out with his girl best friend without me, so that he could save me the trouble of having to see her face. Then I asked him if he thought that she was more attractive than me, and that if he preferred to be with her than with me. He started to laugh and said no, and he felt offended that I would even ask him. So basically, he didn't even answer my question. Sometimes he would tell me that he would go hang out with her at bars. I would stay home and just literally cry the entire time. I would get sick to my stomach picturing my husband hanging out with this Vogue model. That's when I reached out to my husband's best friend and asked him what the deal with her was. And this man spilled all the tea. He told me that they had all been best friends since college, and that the Vogue model was basically in love with my husband the entire time they were in college. But my husband never paid attention to her. But then he told me that they ended up hooking up one night, and that after that my husband was hooked. But then she didn't want to be with him. Instead, they decided to stay best friends. I ran to the bathroom and vomited. Part 3 is up.
Cheated on my husband 14 times with his best friend and other guys, and now I don't know what to do. After finding out that my husband had hooked up with his girl best friend who was really attractive, I vomited. Even though this was before I had met him, something told me that she was probably still in love with him. That's when my husband's guy best friend who had just told me everything invited me over to his house. And then the idea just came to me. I'm gonna start hooking up with whoever I want if my husband's gonna be doing it with his best friend. So I went over to this guy's house, we had a few drinks, and I hooked up with him. Did I regret it? Absolutely not. I felt liberated. It's like I had gotten revenge on my husband. So after that, I went on a rampage. I tried to hook up with as many of his friends as possible. Exactly 6 guys. Then I looked for the guys that I liked in college, and I hooked up with a bunch of them too. In total, 14. This all happened in a month. But now my husband told me that his best friend, the girl that I thought he was hooking up with, is pregnant from another guy and that they're getting married. And that the whole time she was away traveling for a year, she was with this man. Now I feel like a total asshole. What should I do?
My boyfriend and his friends trapped me in a house and assaulted me. Disclaimer, this is not my Storytime, it's me on Instagram. I met my boyfriend in college last year. We had the same class, and during class I would always catch him staring at me. At first it was a little creepy, but once we started talking I realized how charming he was. One day he came up to me and just started asking me about where I was from, and right away I got these butterflies in my stomach. He was really attractive, and I could tell that the girls in our class all looked at him a certain way too. He asked me out on a date and I said yes, but when some of my friends found out that I was going on a date with him, they started telling me things. One of my friends told me that there was a rumor going around that he had assaulted another girl. I just couldn't picture him being that way. He didn't seem capable of anything like that. Later on that day, I got a message from another girl telling me the same thing. And when I asked for information about the girl he supposedly assaulted, they told me that they didn't remember her name. That apparently she just left school after it happened. Part 2 is up. My boyfriend and his friends trapped me in a house and assaulted me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. After I heard about the rumors that he had assaulted a girl, I asked for evidence and nobody had any. Nobody even remembered the name of the girl. So I decided to go on the date with him. He took me on a picnic and at first it was really nice. He had asked me what some of my favorite foods were and he brought them all with him. He brought hummus and cherry tomatoes and chips. But 5 minutes into the picnic, he grabs me and kisses me. Now I'm not saying that I didn't want to be kissed, I just didn't want it to happen so quickly. And he didn't even ask me for permission, which looking back now was the first red flag. After that, he couldn't keep his hands off of me. I never said no, so he just kept going. He kept touching my shoulder and my legs, and he would lean in and kiss me every now and then. By the end of the day, I was into it. For the rest of the relationship, he was always a little bit aggressive. He never asked me if I wanted to do anything, he would just do it. A week after we started dating, he introduced me to his friends. One of them jokingly asked my boyfriend when it was his turn to take with me. Part 3 is up. My boyfriend and his friends trapped me in a house and assaulted me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it's on Instagram. That's when one of his friends asked him when it was his turn to take with me. And although he was joking, it was disgusting. My boyfriend laughed though. He thought it was so funny. Mind you, this is the first time I'm ever meeting his group of friends. After that, there were a few incidents. On one occasion at a party, one of his friends forced me to dance with him for 3 minutes. All the while he kept grabbing my waist and my butt. Finally, my boyfriend came back and I told him and he just laughed. Another time we were at the beach and one of his friends came up behind me and undid my bikini top. Essentially, I flashed everyone. Stuff like that kept happening until the night of the incident. We're all walking back from a club when we stopped at a house. It looked abandoned and my boyfriend insisted that we all go in. I said no, but he finally convinced me. And as soon as we get into the house, my boyfriend tells me that I need to run. He looked so serious that I actually ran up the stairs. Then I could feel all of them chasing me. One of them grabbed my shirt and ripped it. And I got into one of the rooms, I tried to close the door, but they opened it. And another one grabbed my hair and pushed me up against a wall. He started trying to kiss me, but I bit him. I ran into another room and one of them was already there. He tripped me and when I fell to the ground, he grabbed my neck. Then he started saying that I've been teasing them this whole time. Finished tearing my shirt and took it off. I was screaming at the top of my lungs at this point. Another one of the guys came in and I was able to get up and run. They chased me around the house for what seemed like an eternity, but it was probably only 30 seconds. And that's when I realized that the only person I hadn't seen was my boyfriend. And I remembered the rumors about my boyfriend having assaulted a girl. I realized that it was true, and that I was just his next victim. Only this time his friends were involved. Part 4 is up. My boyfriend and his friends trapped me in a house and assaulted me. As I'm hiding in a corner hoping that none of them find me, I hear footsteps walking towards me. I realize that this is probably where they had brought the other girl to assault her, and that they knew every corner of this house, so there was no way for me to hide. Suddenly I feel someone grab my elbow and pull me up. It was the friend that had torn my shirt and told me that I was teasing them. Immediately he pins my arms behind me and starts trying to kiss me. Then he actually said that I should be flattered because they all find me so beautiful, and that the more I fight back, the funner it is for them. Suddenly I hear my boyfriend yell stop, runs up the stairs and into the room. At this point, the other 3 guys were in the room, just watching the other one kiss me. Then he said the joke is over, grabs me and takes me out of the house. That's when I turned to him and say that the rumors were true this whole time. Then he grabbed me by the shoulders, looked me in the face and said that she had wanted it, and that his friends and him were just joking around in the house. Dropped me off at my dorm and the next morning I woke up with bruises and hickeys all over my body. I reported it to the school but they've done nothing. My boyfriend keeps swearing that it's a joke. I blocked him but he keeps showing up at my door. He's being sweet and even sending me groceries. I'll keep you guys updated.
My boyfriend wants to marry me so that he can get his green card. What should I do? Disclaimers, not my story time. Listen to me on Instagram. Okay, this is crazy. My boyfriend and I met 2 weeks ago. We met through Hinge, and after 2 days of talking, he asked me out. I quickly said yes. We were super compatible. He's a model and I'm a model. I'm an actress and he's trying to be an actor. So things just seem perfect. Oh yeah, and he's really, really hot. We went out to lunch and talked for 4 hours. The entire 4 hours, we just laughed and had such a good time. We talked about everything. Our families, our values, our morals. It was honestly the most refreshing conversation I've had on a date ever. Most men just talk about themselves. And he asked me so many questions. After the date, we spent every single day together. We even went to Disney and it was so fun. While we were at Disney, he kissed me for the first time. And he said that he would love to marry me. Part 2 is my boyfriend wants to marry me so that he can get his green card. What should I do? Disclaimers, not my story time. Send me on Instagram. He finally kissed me when we were in Disney. And that's when he told me that he would love to marry me. At first I was very flattered, but then he said, wouldn't you want to marry me? And I said, I mean, I don't really know you. And he said, we'll get to know each other, don't worry. After that, we spent every single day together. At the time, he was living with his roommate and he didn't really like her. So he would come over to my apartment almost every single day and sleep there. He would go to Air One and buy all of my groceries, come over and cook for me. Every single day, he made us amazing food. We'd watch movies together and we'd help each other with all our work stuff. I felt like I was falling in love with him and I'd only known him for a week at that point. That's around the time that he told me he couldn't stand his roommate anymore. And he asked me if he could just stay with me for a few weeks. I told him yes, but that he had to help me with the rent. And of course, he said yes. So this man moved into my apartment after 1 week of knowing each other. I mean, am I going crazy? Part 3 is up. My boyfriend wants to get married to me so that he can get his green card. What should I do? Disclaimer is not my story time. Send me on Instagram. He moved in a week after we met. Everything was going great. He helps out with the bills, does all the cooking. He buys all the groceries and basically does everything for me. Even takes care of my dog, does my laundry. I mean, he's everything I've ever asked for. We have such a good time together. We watch movies every single night. We go out to dinner and hang out with friends. And he's so funny and makes me laugh so much. Fast forward another week. This is when he says that he really does want to marry me. I told him that I would love to marry him too, but that we don't know each other yet. And he said the L word. And I said it back. That's when he said that the only way he could stay in the country with me was if we got married. And that he had already looked into other possibilities, but that was the only one. I told my parents, but they freaked out and told me I shouldn't marry him. All my friends think that he's just trying to use me. But I don't think so. I really do believe this man loves me. I mean, he does so much for me and really cares for me. So I need you guys to help me think of ways to put him to the test. How can I know that he's faithful and that he really loves me and isn't using me? What should I do?
I think my boyfriend is in an incestual relationship with his sister. I know this sounds ridiculous, but listen before you call me insane. I'm running this because I can't sleep. I've dated him for a year. He's Italian and I'm an American student in Rome. Looking back, there had been signs even early on. I took all of this as cultural at first. One of our first dates, we were talking about our families and he showed me a picture of his sister and raved about her beauty. She is actually gorgeous. She's a classic Italian beauty and very chic. I was jealous of her then, but had no idea where this was going to go. I have only been around her a handful of times, but she had made it clear she does not approve of us dating. She's icy, distant, and hostile. She has said in front of me that he should be with an Italian. She speaks several different languages, including English, but every time I try to talk to her in English, she replies in Italian. You are in Italy, speak Italian. She once told me he'll be gone soon. My boyfriend is openly very affectionate with her. He dances with her and whispers in her ear, kisses her cheek and the side of her mouth, hugs her closely. Every time I've seen them together, he's brought her a nice gift. People here are genuinely affectionate, but everything combined is off. Once at a family dinner, I was helping his mom with the food and he and his sister went out to the patio. I looked out and she was sitting on his lap. What sister does that? I also found this very weird while watching Friends when Monica and what's the fuck's his name? Ross would sit on each. I'm like, that's weird. If I ever try to sit on my brother's lap, I think he would like punch me. I have also seen her caress his bare chest at the beach. This same time at the beach, he carried her in the water with her legs wrapped around his waist and his hands were practically on her ass. Sorry, I can't help but laugh, but this is fucking weird. If they did this when they thought I couldn't see, what do they do when they're really alone? He's also gotten into a physical fight with her boyfriend, but I'm not sure what it was about. Earlier tonight, my feeling got a lot worse. He never leaves his phone sitting around, but he did this time. He got a message from her and I looked over. She said, "My heart is yours, my king." And we were She said, "My heart is yours, my king," and we were made for each other. To clarify, this is a translation from Italian. I left without telling him. He blew up my phone, but I have no idea what to say to him. This has been my best relationship, but this cannot be normal, can it? I'm sick to my stomach and feel mortified thinking about this. A few things worth noting that I forgot to mention. She wears a locket with a photo of them in it. She was sitting across from me at dinner and opened it and gave me a taunting look. At the time, I didn't want to call her out and look crazy, but now I think she definitely was trying to rub it in my face. Also, not only was she sitting on his lap, but she was looking into his eyes and twirling his hair. I also saw him kiss her on the neck near her ear. It wasn't super smoochy, but to me it seemed like a weird place to kiss your sister. Tell me to drop the class if I don't like your rules? Okay then, you'll lose 5 students and your job. So when I was a freshman in college, I registered for a basic-ass English 102 course that doubled as a humanities credit. I thought, great, 2 birds, 1 stone, despite the rate my professor for this class being abysmal at best. A few things to note. I have ADHD and dyslexia, so I've had a hard time reading most times, but especially handwritten stuff, even my own. It's also important to note that I had an ADA allowance on file, meaning I get some permissions to allow me to take classes and function as normally as possible. These permissions include use of my tablet during class to write notes and about an hour longer on tests. Well, first day of class, the professor strolls in with the arrogance and snobitude of someone who thinks they're getting tenured this year. He starts talking, going over the syllabus, and says, there will be no phones, laptops, or technology of any kind in my class. You will write all of your notes by hand, which isn't going to work for me, so I raise my hand and ask him if I can talk to him privately about the rule. That went over about as well as a lead balloon, and he starts getting snippy and says, anything you need to talk with me about can be found in your syllabus. But again, I said that I needed to talk to him and that it was pretty important. Finally, he just says to say it to the class. He doesn't have time to take out to deal with whining of any kind. So I say that I'm dyslexic and need my tablet to do the notes and read the assignments, and that my ADA permissions are on file and emailed to all my professors before class. He says, yeah, I saw the email, but I don't care. You can do the work just like everyone else. You're not special even if you were in special ed. The class goes deadly quiet at that. I'm absolutely shocked at his bold and completely hilarious lack of awareness and care for his job. I'm staring at him open mouthed and he thinks he won. He's got this smug little face like I've just been told and there's no other options, nor is there any way he'll regret his behavior. One of the girls in class finds her voice and calls out his ableism and lack of decorum, but he cuts her off saying, if you don't like my rules, you can drop the class. So she says, okay, and pulled out her laptop and dropped the class right in front of him. In taking the cue from her, 3 other students and I do the same and we leave class together at the same time. I've never met this girl before, but then she asked me if I want to go to the dean because honestly I'm really shaken, so I said yes, and we go straight there telling the dean of students what happened as well as the ADA counselor. They took the girl's statement and mine and discovered that this professor had pulled this shit for years but nobody wanted to get involved. 6 months later, I hear that not only had the professor not gotten tenured, but he was fired and blacklisted from teaching at the college level. For people who don't know what tenure is, that's when a teacher gets like locked in and they're guaranteed their job safety